It's easy to get wrapped into how you think this story's going to end. Like, okay, we have Rachel for maybe another 6 months or another year, or maybe she lives to 5, you know, and I think that's the wrong way to look at it.
Some families want to look at all of this, and some people don't. Some people want to look at it right from the beginning because all those realizations are present. And sometimes those realizations about what isn't going to happen actually come later. So the scaffolding is about being there and listening to kind of where they are in the moment and beginning to help them think about what do they need now that they realize things are not going to be as they thought they were.
The hardest part of being a caregiver for William at the beginning was I was so drowning in grief but trying to avoid it that I was focusing on work, and because work was my getaway. And then work made me take 4 months off, paid time off, and then I had no option but to go home and be part of the daily routine.
It's very common, and I think human nature, particularly if you've grown up in Western culture, is to ask, why me? Why my child? Why now?
But I think in terms of asking myself, why me, I think it's getting less and less, and instead of why was I chosen to have a daughter with such a horrible diagnosis, it's why was I chosen to have this special child? You know, why me? What did I do that was so wonderful that I deserve her?
The fact of the matter is that I guess you do evolve in your own way. Barb evolved her way. I evolved my way. As long as it brings you back together at the end, I think you're okay. And if you can trust that process, then maybe, you know, there's some solace in that.
It's a really hard thing to juggle. Like, I guess there's a fine line between hope and acceptance. I don't know.
Unlike John, who doesn't really like to talk about the prognosis and his end of life, I want the DNR filled out. I went to the cemetery and picked out a plot. I'm thinking about his funeral in my mind all the time, which sounds so strange, but it's my way of sort of preparing myself for it.
If the diagnosis or the prognosis or whatever is grim, I want to know that. I want to know what I'm dealing with so I can, you know, motor through it and deal with it and hit it head on instead of getting sideswiped.
So it really becomes about good fit. You want the best people with the best medical knowledge for your child, and you want people that you feel comfortable with.
I think it's very important, though, to find a doctor who will take your lead and who will work with you and recognize that you know your child and that none of these decisions are easy.
They're the experts on the goals and the values of the family. And somewhere in their process of deciding what is right here, they have to review this from the lens of parents, not as a sort of technical assessment.
I would say the hardest part of being Talon's mom was having to make difficult decisions for him, knowing that nothing was going to make him have his 5th birthday or get his license or get married. So making any kind of decision about his life was very difficult for me.
I need his life to be good now. And that's, you know, I wanted to make sure he was not in pain. I wanted to make sure that he was living a life that was worth living. Living in a hospital for the next 20 years, hooked up to machines, was not an acceptable life to me.
I think that the biggest regrets that we have is when we go into a decision without having all of the information. And being able to get all that information and what it truly means, not in general, but for your child.
No matter what the decision is that you make, it was the right decision that day and that moment, and that is really all that matters.
And I was crying and crying and crying because I said, God, I don't know if we should the right treatment for her. We don't understand all this medicine world and stuff that they're gonna do. But they say, God, we trust you. We know that you have a plan with Christy, and it's gonna be your decision, God. And
It's in your hands.
Having a child where you get a diagnosis of a life-threatening illness stirs up all of those belief systems in sort of across religions and across spiritual beliefs. So that for some people, it's a huge question about why this was done to them. If there's a belief in God, why would God do this to me? For other people, it's like, this is in God's hands. It's really, it's not for me to ask.
Probably the hardest part for me, experience-wise with town, is that I had to go to work every day to support the family and not see my boy as much. Knowing I'm playing my role as a father to support my family, being self-employed and fighting for the work and pushing forward and know you're doing it right in your mind.
And as the complications grew and his care became more in depth, that just continued to create a divide between us. I was living in the hospital a lot of the time with Kai, and Mark was here working. And eventually we ended up living very separate lives.
It just brings everything, you know, at you at once, and you can't dissect it. But you need, if you want your marriage, you need to fight for it.
We go see someone who's been tremendous and has been a great help. And we talk about so many issues that you would think, oh, that's not that big of a deal. Yeah, well, we're going to talk about it. And it helps, you know, and believe it or not, it even helps in the care of your little special needs child. And you wouldn't think, you know, it's not just, you know, marriage therapy, it's life therapy.
We would say to each other, you are my rock. And the only way that you and I will be able to get through this in a positive way is by supporting each other.
We hear from siblings over and over and over again, even though they completely understand that it was not intentional in any way, that they actually felt neglected. And sometimes they felt almost abandoned, or they felt sort of shuttled from person to person.
Well, we're so busy focused on Mallory, you know, I don't want to miss out on what's going on with the other children. And so, you know, we try to do as much as we can with them. It hurts to have to go out and leave her home, because for the longest time we took her everywhere with us. I don't want them to feel like their life, you know, gosh, I missed all my childhood because my parents were focused on Mallory.
We just talked a lot with them, and all the questions that they had, we answered them. And if we couldn't answer them, we would have one of our visiting nurses answer them.
I can't even remember like exactly what I said to him, but I was crying so hard. I was trying not to cry. And Jake put his little arm around my back and was just like rubbing my lower back. And I told him, I said, you know, Jake, she's sick and she's, you know, not going to live a long life. And he said, I'm trying not to cry, Mom. And I said, it's okay, Jake, you can cry, you know.
And to anticipate, to begin to think about, am I going to be able to go on? What's this going to look like? What's it going to be like without all these medical people in my life?
It was a huge fear. I had no relief from that, from the thoughts of, okay, one day I won't have to live this life anymore. One day I won't have to be in the hospital. I won't have to be carting a wheelchair around. I can go to the grocery store by myself. Like, that scared me because it was 100% of my identity at that point.
And I was worried about always looking over the crib, being empty. And that was one of the first things. I'm always like, everywhere I want to look, I want to see my boy. I was always nervous of not seeing my boy. So I wanted to make sure I had pictures everywhere I looked in the house. Everywhere, everything I did, I wanted him there.
So the importance of having end-of-life conversations early on in the journey, I find, can be very liberating for the families.
All our care choices that we made throughout his life really came to a point and all met together. And William's last moments were very peaceful. He simply exhaled, and he had all his family in and around him at home. And I think every scenario that I played in my head was much worse than that moment for us.
He went peaceful. He was just breathing, slowing his breathing down like he went to sleep. And I just kept talking to him. And I said to him, I'll continue to be the father, to let people know who you are and what you've done for all of us and what you meant and what you started. I want to keep it going. And, it didn't really hit me until I actually looked at my wife and said, I want to hold my boy after he passed away. And she kind of gave me a look, and I said, give me my boy. And when she passed him over, that for me opened the floodgates, and I just released, and I cried, and I just cried, and told him I was very happy and proud of him.
But to try to look at it as I don't know where it's going to go, and you try to plan for that, and we've all tried to plan, it's too overwhelming. But the fact of the matter is you do evolve, you adapt, you actually gain strength, and you don't have to deal with it all in one day.
I think for anyone watching this, you will believe it when it happens to you that you are capable of seeing this through, and you are braver than you can ever imagine.